Hello, and welcome to I'm Not A Changeling. My name is Miss Logan, and I am not a changeling. I'm just autistic. This series will go into various facets of autism, and I will delve into some of the symptoms, talk about my own experiences, and go through what the process is like for getting diagnosed. Today, we're going to be looking at a specific trope in fiction, and I will be discussing how it affects the autistic community, and more specifically, autistic women and girls. This trope is called the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. In its simplest terms, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, often abbreviated as MPDG, is a girl that's not like other girls. She exists mostly as a quirky love interest and very rarely has any personality outside of the jaded male character she's seen dating in the novel or film or TV show. Typically, they are unapologetically effeminate, incredibly eccentric, and entirely free-spirited. And while on the surface, this trope does not seem harmful, when you look a little deeper, you can realise just how toxic the idea can be. In a way, she acts as a kind of evolutionary relative to the good girl that likes the bad boy, which in and of itself is also an incredibly problematic trope. Now, I adore the idea of someone bringing out their best qualities and evolving as a person to feel even slightly worthy of the person that loves them. In theory. Most of the time, in practice, the good girl / bad guy trope leads to a romanticization of abuse and unhealthy relationships. Now, there are a number of reasons as to why this is the case, but the most prominent is that usually the bad boy in the relationship is one of the most violently vile, misogynistic, abusive creeps to walk the earth. Someone that manipulates and uses their partner in awful ways. Meanwhile, the girl is a childlike maiden, pure and innocent until meeting our charismatic hero, in air quotes, who coerces out her sexuality while she brings the kindness out in him. And all throughout, the man growls at anyone who listens, while our heroine lets him off with actual crimes, with naught but a slap on the wrist, if that. And that's not even getting into the various violations of consent that populate these kinds of books. It disgusts me that people find this attractive. It's like that old adage that people used to say to girls when boys were being mean to them on the playground. That boy only hits you because he likes you. Wait, no, just no. That is not a healthy thing to tell anyone, regardless of their gender. It's 2023. That type of behaviour is not appropriate from anyone. And this romance trope seems to think that it's perfectly fine. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, right. Well, a similar concept is being implemented in the idea of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, especially in the romance genre. Only instead of taming his wild temper, she acts as his therapist and is meant to help him overcome all of his trauma, which is usually related to his mother, and become a better person, even if it may not be so obvious in the text itself. She cures his nihilism with her eccentricity and quirkiness, and makes his life so much better in the process through her violent optimism and eccentric personality. Now, before I go any further, I will say this. Your romantic partner should 100% be a source of emotional support. They should help you get through tough times, but they should not be the only ones doing this. Nor are they necessarily required to. It is not anyone's job to fix a broken person other than that person themselves. This is especially harmful because, for a long time, men weren't allowed to be emotionally vulnerable or go through mental health problems. This led to a lot of men relying solely on their wives or girlfriends or just female friends in general as their only source of emotional solace, which is obviously not good, as this puts them in a very peculiar place where one person has been left with all of this emotional baggage that the other has given them, and the other does not reciprocate the action when needed. Yes, the people in your lives should be supportive of you, and yes, they can be helpful when you're going through a hard time, but they absolutely cannot be your only source of emotional support. You yourself are the only one in control of your own emotional well-being. It creates this rather unhealthy dynamic, which can lead to one person feeling guilty for even wanting to exit the relationship. And that itself can lead to a lot of things like emotional abuse, gaslighting, and many more disturbing ideas that make my skin crawl. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl is also a character archetype with a high degree of objectification. She's either seen as this perfect girl that the main character drools over for the entirety of the plot, or, more commonly, the one that fixes his melancholic views on life. Now, why is this a bad thing? Well, it sets a rather dangerous precedent. The men these books are targeted towards see these women as something to be sought after, something to chase and to crave. Then, when their partner starts showing signs of their autism, their neurodivergence, they're tossed aside without care. It also takes the brunt of the actual work behind self-improvement off of the person in general and places it in the hands of the MPDG. This entire thing turns especially dangerous and harmful when you learn that autistic women are more likely to end up in abusive relationships in comparison to the wider allistic populace. Another harmful facet of this trope is that it can most definitely lead to the fetishization and over-sexualization of women that match the description of this trope. And it puts these girls on a pedestal. It makes them an idea rather than a person, something to chase after and idolize, rather than a human with their own wants and needs and thoughts. However, one cannot discuss the MPDG and not bring up its somewhat problematic roots. This involves a wide level of misogyny that still persists somewhat to this day. The idea of being not like other girls, or, in the more modern sense, the pick-me girl. The idea of femininity being seen as lesser or not as valid as other, more masculine forms of expression. For a long time, a lot of people believed that being feminine in any way meant that you were somehow less as a woman, less as a person. And for a little while, in my youth, even I fell into this idea. I mean, as a kid, I hated Pink. I didn't like the popular music of the time, and I rarely, if ever, wore skirts. Basically, the idea of not being like other girls led me to detest femininity in all of its forms, which definitely led to a lot of conflicting feelings through my adolescence. However, as I've grown and learned and evolved, I've finally come to terms somewhat with my femininity. I am fine with wearing skirts. I don't mind pink. I love women. I love being a woman, being a girl in my own way, and expressing my femininity in a way that makes me happy. Because there is no one way to be a girl. Girls are incredibly diverse. I mean, if you pull someone out from all the millions and millions of women around the globe and put them beside me, then yeah, we probably wouldn't be the same. But that's okay, because yeah, I'm not like other girls. I'm not like other autistic girls either. And that's amazing, because it means that the human experience is so vast and so diverse that even if two people looked the same, there would still be a wide number of experiences and thoughts and beliefs that set them apart, which is what makes life so beautiful. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Now, I'm not opposed to the idea of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl character in the slightest. Phoebe was one of my favourite characters in Friends, and she was basically the blueprint for how the trope is today. The mother of the modern MPDG, some would say. What I do have a problem with is the way that the character is presented in modern fiction. In fiction nowadays, the MPDG is little more than an item in a story. She doesn't really have an arc to herself, and while this seems to be a problem in most fiction, it is especially prevalent in cases of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Instead of trying to help create a three-dimensional person out of their female lead, all of the development and conflict and struggle in the story goes towards the male lead as he wallows in his own bleak existence. Now, what does autism have to do with this? Well, let's just take a look at our prime example that I mentioned earlier. Phoebe Buffay is a character that is incredibly autistic coded, whether intentional or not on the half of the writers. She has an incredibly strict set of personal morals, just like many autistic people do. When she was pregnant, she didn't want to eat meat even though she was desperately craving it. Her responses don't seem to match most social situations, and can seem rather rude or out of place at times. And she has an incredibly rich inner world, resulting in her wonderful imagination and the creation of such masterpieces as Smelly Cat. The more and more you look at it, the more the traits of the MPDG seem to align with those of autistic women. The disregard for social norms is obviously the biggest sign. The honesty that a lot of people with autism have matches up. We're usually very truthful with people because of our rigid black and white thinking, and growing up, we're told that it isn't nice to lie, so instead, we just stay truthful. We say our honest opinions, and while this may sometimes be an incredibly endearing quality, a lot of the time, it leads to social suicide. We become outcast because we don't see the strange societal tango laid out before us. And this makes it hard for us to make friends, just like the MPDG. The MPDG is very much inspired by the traits of autistic women, whether we want to admit it or not. However, there is a way for us autistic women to reclaim the character trope for ourselves. We can write our own stories about them. We can give these fictional women the complexity and intricacy that they deserve. We can have a revenge of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. We just have to focus the plot on them and leave the jaded, bummed out guy in the dust. It will make for a much more emotionally in-depth piece than whatever other bottom-of-the-barrel romance someone can write, lacking in any depth or nuance with the female lead character. It's 2023. It's time for the revenge of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. But that's just my thoughts on the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. What are yours? Is she a representation of modern neurodivergent femininity, or a remnant of times long gone? Feel free to let me know. Other than that, just remember, I'm not a changeling, and neither are you.